Alright guys, how you doing? It's Rabea, hope you're all doing well. So in this video, I am responding to quite a few requests I saw when I asked you guys what kind of dialing in videos you wanted me to do. I saw quite a lot of comments saying dialing in amps, EQ. Obviously we can do dialing in like high gain, pushed cleans, mid gain tones and all that kind of stuff. That's a little bit different because I can incorporate pedals into that and we can talk about specific amps and what their jobs are. However, in this video, it's more about the EQ of the amp and how you can use that to kind of get the tones that you kind of after, depending on the guitar you're using. So I'm not really going to use any pedals other than maybe some reverb and delay, aside from maybe a tube screamer, possibly. But really the point of this video is to just quickly go through how you can dial in an amplifier using its EQ, resonance and presence on maybe a crunch and a high gain. So you've probably noticed, sat next to me on my right is the Soldano SLO 100. I chose this amp for this video. And before all you guys say, oh, it's really, really expensive, why couldn't you have used a Katana or something like that? It's not really the point. What I'm trying to get across here is using an amplifier that's got bass, middle, treble, resonance, presence, a clean, a crunch, and an overdrive. I wanted to choose an amp that, one, I know, two, I know has those features, and three, because, you know, it sounds good and I have the opportunity to use it. So it's really not about the quality of the amp. All amps will kind of respond the same if we're talking about tube amps. I also wanted to use single coils, humbuckers, and a baritone because that will determine how you mess with the EQ on your amplifier, depending on what kind of guitar you have. First rule of thumb is master volume. It massively affects how effective the EQ is, the presence and the resonance of your amplifier. So the lower the master volume is, the more you can get out of your EQ, your presence, and your resonance, so on and so forth. And I really learned this when I was using my plugin, when we were designing my plugin, because it made a big difference where the master was set on the plugin as it reacts like a real amp. Before we get going, I just want to show you what I mean when I talk about the master volume being lower, how much it allows to affect the EQ. So I'm using a high gain tone, so you can hear what it's doing. And then I'm also going to use humbuckers. So, master volume is quite low, as you can see. Watch what happens when we mess with the EQ. So hopefully you could hear just how effective the EQ is, and that's because the master's low. I would love to be able to boost the master up and show you what happens on the other way, but it would be very loud and it would probably be bad for the microphones, well, particularly because I've got the gain set on the microphones. But if you run any Neural DSP plugin or any plugin like that, or a modeler, and you boost the master in your modeler and then try and mess with the EQ, you'll probably find it's less effective, especially the presence. A quick caveat before we get going, this is completely subjective. This is my approach to EQing an amplifier, dialing it in with the guitars I use. It's going to change depending on the guitars you use, the pickups, the woods the guitar's made from, the style of music, the amplifier, of course, but as I've said, we're using tube amps in this video, so there are rules within using tube amps and EQ sections that are going to be very, very similar because of the inherent design process of making a tube amplifier. It's going to be different with modelers, it's going to be different with solid-state amplifiers. If the amp model's good and it reacts like a proper amplifier should, then some of this will carry over. Maybe I'll do a video using QC or a modeler of some description, a plugin, whatever, just to show you as well. And that way we can, you know, mess with the controls in a really intense way, such as turn the master all the way up. But I just wanted to give you that caveat by saying it's all subjective. This is my approach to EQing an amplifier. Hopefully you'll find some use in this that you can take away and try for yourself. So for this video, you can see the master is down at around 3, which is still pretty loud, especially if it's a 100-watt amplifier. But generally speaking, most tube amps are going to be loud around, well, they're always loud, but around sort of 3 is a good place for most gigs and volume situations. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to be using crunch. I'm not going to go on the clean channel. We'll do that in a different video because it's different. When you're using gain stages, you got lots more harmonic content in there, and it's a little bit more obvious what's happening with the EQ, presence and resonance when you're using gain. As you can see, all the controls bar the master volumes are at halfway, and we'll mess around with those briefly, but I just wanted to give you the sound of the amplifier with the guitar straight away. So let's say that I like the sound of that. On the bridge pickup is a little bit shrill, so we'll stay with the bridge pickup for this. Let's say I want to thicken that up a little bit, take a little bit of that intensity out. So I'm going to drop the treble. One thing that I like doing is if I drop the treble, I might counteract that with a bit of presence. So it still gives me that top end, but it's not necessarily quite so intense. I might boost the depth, might boost a touch of mid. So that's already a bit thicker now. I might boost the gain a little bit, just because it's nice to have a bit more gain. And you might find as well, when you boost the gain, that's where you start hearing more of the frequencies or more of the EQ coming into effect, because as I say, there's more like harmonic content going on. So things start to sound a little more exaggerated when you turn the gain up. Another way of thinking about gain is like compression almost. So it's going to sort of accentuate everything a little bit more, including the EQ. So you can hear that even though before, when the gain was lower, it was a little bit, say, thicker as I dialed it in, well now it's almost brighter again because there's more gain. So I might back off the presence. I might still want a little less treble. Oh, wrong one. So I've backed the treble off even more. I've brought the presence back down to halfway, and I've boosted the mid. Put the mids quite in because it's quite a bold sound, especially with single coils. That's starting to sound like thicker and not so shrill. So I might boost a little bit of presence, boost the gain. Now that's the bridge pickup. Again, if we go onto the neck, we might find, I don't know yet, if it's a little bit too dull now. No, sounds good. So what I'm going to do now is not touch the gain, but I'm going to take the EQ back to where it was at halfway, so you can hear just how much of a difference it makes. If I add a tube screamer to that, it's not going to get really intense like it would have done without adjusting the EQ. Going to keep the tube screamer on so you can hear the difference if I put the EQ back. For me, it's too much. It's too wiry and too intense. So back to where we were. Now, if we move over to the overdrive, I'm going to reset the EQ. Overdrive's at halfway, as you can see. Everything else is at halfway by the master volume, and this is the overdrive. It's very similar, but obviously we've moved into a different gain stage, so it's actually tightened up the low end. We've got a lot more presence. So what I want to do is a very similar approach at this point. I'm going to do the same thing by backing off the treble. Well, let's go back to the same sort of EQ settings that we had. So mid's up, treble's down, presence is up a touch, depth is up a touch. I'm liking that. I might give it a touch of bass, and I'm going to boost the overdrive. Really, what we've done is pretty much the same thing. The only exception being that I've added more bass, because I think when you're moving to this gain stage, you know, when you add more gain, everything accentuates. So usually what they do in amp design is that they add like a filter that tends to take out some of that low end because it would get too flubby otherwise. And you'll find that the more gain that you add to an amplifier, sort of more intense it gets in the low end as well as the high end as everything. So with that in mind, see what happens if we throw a tube screamer on. Bit of reverb in there for good measure, but clearly it's working with the tube screamer as well. It's not getting too intense. If I put the tube screamer on with the EQ back where it was, again, just to prove the point. For me, that's too much. This kind of rule may apply to other amplifiers, especially higher gain amplifiers. If you're using single coils, you might want to mess with the treble by bringing it down, so you kind of counteract some of the inherent shrill nature of single coil pickups, unless you want that. It depends on the style of music you play. But for like rock, heavy rock, higher gain stuff with single coils, that's really useful to do. Bring down the treble, might boost the mids, because with single coils, again, you might find that humbuckers are actually more mid-forward inherently than a single coil because there's more pickup. Generally, it's taking up more space, or it's picking up more space. And that sort of gives more of a mid-range thing. You know, like a Les Paul sounds honky, whereas a Strat sounds spanky. Spanky being that kind of scoop spank thing. So you might want to boost the mids. And again, depending on your amplifier and what you're running it through, you might need to boost a bit of low end to get a bit more thump back into the amp, or use the resonance. And the more gain that you use, the more you'll need to affect those particular parameters. But yeah, back off the treble, ride the presence if you want a bit more top end, bit more resonance and bass, and yeah, a lot of mids on a single coil if you want a nice rock single coil tone. So that's single coils, dialing in an amp. Next, move on to humbuckers. Okay, humbuckers. So first thing I'll say, inherently, they're a higher output. They're going to drive the amp harder, so you might not need to use as much gain. You're going to find that they might not be as defined in the top end because single coils are picking up less space, therefore it's thinner, therefore it's inherently going to introduce more high end, or at least perceived high end. So you might find that humbuckers sound a little bit flubby if you keep the settings the same as you did for single coils. And I'll show that in a second. So yeah, we've got higher output, we've got probably a little less top end, but we're going to have much more mid-range, and you might find the lack of definition, but you'll find a bit more low end. So we do have to EQ the amp completely differently at this point. First thing I'm going to show you is everything at 12 o'clock on the crunch. This is how it sounds. So straight away, there's nothing about that I'm not particularly fond of. I might just boost the gain if I want a bit more, you know, crunch out of it. But we had to EQ the amp differently for a Strat, or for single coils, should I say, because it was too sort of thin and shrill for me, whereas this, it's not hurting my ears sat in the room, it's sounding nice. First thing I'm gonna do is put in the EQ controls I did for the single coil so you can hear just what it sounds like. So we're gonna back the treble off like we did, we're gonna boost the mids, bit of presence, bit of depth. This is what we had for the single coils. For me, that's lacking top end because we've rolled the treble off so much. The mids weren't necessarily offensive, but yeah, first thing I noticed was that it needed more definition. So back at halfway, sounds good to me. I might boost the gain to 7. And you can hear straight away we've got a little more, not fizz, but like it's sharper in the top end. It's like hitting the ear harder. I'm starting to hear that kind of sort of 5, 6K kind of sound that we might want to doctor. It's worth pointing out that if you hear that sort of sound and you want to get rid of it, you could boost the mids. If you scoop the mids, it's going to accentuate it more. I'll show you. So everything at halfway. If I scoop the mids, you can hear it's pulling out all the sort of beef of the tone. So now you're getting that low end and high end smiley face thing. So boosted the gain. I might roll off a bit of, actually I might boost the treble, but roll off the presence. Okay, it's pretty good. Gonna back off on the treble. I'm gonna boost the mid, maybe a tiny bit. I've boosted the depth, but I'm gonna roll off a bit of bass. So for me, that's like a thick crunch for like those kind of riffs, you know. Okay, so now we're doing the high gain. This is what we've got with everything at halfway. So there's a few things for me that aren't quite doing it there. What I want to do really is, because we're getting quite a lot of output from the pickup, it's obviously driving harder. It's not quite thick enough for me. We can do that by turning up the gain. So I'll do that. But now I'm hearing quite a bit of like fizz, so I might want to get rid of that a touch. Back off the treble a touch. I'm going to scoop the mids a touch, boost the presence. So that's nice and thick. And again, if we throw on a tube screamer with that, it's got a nice amount of chug like that. By backing off the treble, I'm getting a thick rhythm tone that I can use a tube screamer with, and it sounds good to me. So if you're curious why I've boosted the presence and backed off the treble, it's because they affect different areas, right? So if I'm going back to halfway, but I boost the treble up, in fact, I'll bring the presence down and the treble up. So that's, for me, it's a little bit intense, but if I throw on the tube screamer now, still sounds good, but for me, it's a bit too messy. So go my other way. So we boost the presence up, bring the treble down, without the tube screamer. We throw on the tube screamer. I might boost the treble a tiny bit. Now in a lead tone scenario, it's actually going to work too, in my opinion, because you don't want lots of really intense, sharp, high end when you're playing lead. So tube screamer, reverb and delay. So that's me EQing my amp for humbuckers. What I'm looking for there is definition. I want the thickness. I don't want it to sound too flubby and muddy, which is generally what might happen if you keep the settings the same as you did for when I used the single coils. You know, we've got more low end with the humbucker. We've actually got less definition, more mid-range, and obviously more output through the humbucker. So you might want to ride the mid back a little bit, maybe boost the treble a touch, put the presence where you want for taste, and you might want to be conscious of the bass control, because using humbuckers, you're going to find that it's going to give you a little bit more bass. Right, so baritone, crunch. Let's have a listen. So that's quite nice. Let's see what happens if I run it with a bit of reverb and delay. Yeah, so a similar approach with the humbuckers here. These are voiced quite differently to my silos, but I'm going to back off the mid. I actually like the low end, but for the sake of this, I'm going to back off the depth rather than the bass. And I'm going to boost the treble a touch and the gain. So, let's have a listen. I'm going to back off the gain, actually. I don't want that much. I'm actually going to boost the presence. What I'm looking for here is when I pick that high string, I want to feel like I can hear that like attack of the pick that allows me to play dynamically if I want, you know. So that's why using the presence and actually using the treble can help with that sort of tone. And again, backing off the mids a little bit so it scoops it, so it's accentuating that high end a bit more. Let's say I just want a thick crunch. Using those same settings, it's gotten a bit harsh again. So I'm gonna bring the treble down a touch, keep the mids just below halfway, treble just below halfway, but I've boosted the presence. Might boost the mid a touch. Back off the treble a bit more, bring the mid back down, but I'm going to use a tube screamer. I want more treble. Back to halfway. Back off the presence. Boost the treble above. I'm trying a different approach now because I'm not getting out of it what I want. It's still sounding a bit shrilly, like shh, too much of that going on. So it's different pickups as well, but I'm going to boost the mids now with the tube screamer on, but I'm backing off the treble and I'm just keeping the presence there. See what happens. Treble maybe above halfway and the presence down. There, we're getting closer now. Starting to hear the chord definition, and I'm not getting bombarded with like high, sort of fizzy tone. Bring the treble down, boost the presence a touch. So that for me is like a thick, using the tube screamer of course, that's a thick baritone. Might take the tube screamer off to hear what it's like without. Still nice and thick. I've got rid of some of that shrill kind of top end that I'm not a fan of. But I've been able to keep this sort of definition of the chords. It's nice and thick. It's a nice sort of thick crunch using a baritone. But it's completely different EQ settings to what we've used with the other one, as you might have been able to see. Anyway, let's move on to overdrive. Now, the first thing I'm going to point out with overdrive, with a baritone, is that it's going to be flubby because it's so low. So it sounds cool, it depends on the style of music you're doing, but I might want to make this a little bit more defined. So I don't think I'm going to use the presence, I think I might actually back off the presence, drop the mids. Actually, I'm going to put the mid back at halfway, presence down even more. Still a bit intense, so I'm going to back off the treble, boost the mid, going to take out some low end, but I'm going to put the depth in. Something that I like to do is if I'm boosting the treble, I might back off the presence. If I'm boosting the presence, I might back off the treble. If I'm boosting the bass, I might back off the resonance. If I'm boosting the resonance, I might back off the bass. Hopefully that makes sense. Right, so bringing out a bit of low end has helped, keeping the depth where it is and boosting those mids. So this is what we've got now. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's see what happens if I throw on the tube screamer. It's too much. Gonna back off the gain. Gonna bring the mids down. Presence down. Might back off the gain even more. I like where the bass is sitting. I like where the mids are sitting now. I might try back off the treble, but boost the presence. Depth down, bit less treble, bit more mid, bit more presence. So now, with the tube screamer on, I've got a nice thick rhythm that I can play baritone with, where I'm getting all the chord definition. It's chuggy, it's powerful, and it's giving me everything that I'm looking for when I'm playing in a lower tuning. I want the chord definition, want the aggression, want the fatness, want the rhythm. But again, it's quite different to how I had it set up with the humbuckers. So there you go. There is a quick video. I don't know how quick it's going to be, but a quick video on EQing amplifiers, specifically tube amplifiers. If you want me to do this with modelers, plugins like solid state amps, please put it in the comment section below. But for tube amplifiers, and again, it doesn't matter what tube amplifier, because there are fundamental principles within this video that apply to all tube amps, or mostly all tube amps because of the way they're designed. Maybe there's some useful information you've taken from this, but as I said at the start of the video, it's all subjective. It depends on the music you're playing, the guitar you've got, the gear that you've got, the way you play, finger tone, all the rest of it. Whether it's single coils, humbuckers, baritones, 7 strings, active pickups, passive pickups, it all makes a difference. Fundamental points to take from this video, if you found any of it useful, I would say if you're running a master lower, you're going to get more out of your EQ, your presence and your resonance, so bear that in mind. There's a point where running it too low, the amp doesn't sound very good, so you want to make sure it's somewhere decent. For me, if I'm running more bass, I back off the resonance, and vice versa. If I'm running more resonance, I back off the bass. And if I'm running more treble, I'll back off the presence, and vice versa. If I want more presence, I'll back off the treble. If I said that right. But yeah, those are the two big points for me. The master volume relationship with the EQ and the master presence resonance. And then of course, the relationship between treble and presence and resonance and bass. Those are quite important. But yeah, hopefully you found this interesting. Hopefully you found some of it useful. It was a request from you guys, so hopefully it was something that ticks the boxes. In any case, I appreciate you watching these videos, these dialing in videos. Keep your suggestions coming in the comment section below, and I'll try and share more knowledge with you. So yeah, that's the video. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, because I don't do affiliate links or anything like that, I don't really do much paid content, if any, anymore. You can support me by checking out my merch, listening to my music on streaming platforms. All adds up. Check out the merch. I've got these t-shirts. I've got my tarot design t-shirts at sleeplessapparel.co.uk. As you can see, Mike over there modeling the long sleeve. But please check out the links in the description box. Check out a t-shirt. It would mean a lot. Check out my tabs. Check out my music, all the rest of it. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Like, subscribe, and share. I've been Rabea, and I'll see you all very soon.